Mr. Speaker, if I was to describe an entity that changes its fiscal reporting midway through the year, alters the financial metrics by which it judges itself, repeatedly misses every fiscal anchor it sets, racks up unsustainable debt, and refuses to provide transparent answers to basic financial questions, one might assume that I was describing a corporation on the brink of collapse. But, Mr. Speaker, those are the defining characteristics of this government. This would never be acceptable in the private sector, and it should have no place in our government. Year after year, national debt keeps climbing. Interest payments now exceed what we transfer provinces for healthcare. The deficit once promised by the Liberal government to be modest and temporary has now doubled. And now, instead of restoring discipline, the government is rewriting the rules, stretching the definition of capital investment so far that even subsidies, tax breaks, and housing incentives are being rebranded as capital formation.
Shame.
What a joke.
Yep.
This is accounting tricks, a deliberate attempt to make the books look better than they are. More blatantly, this government knows it has lost control of Canada's finances and is now redefining capital investment as a communication strategy to confuse Canadians. The Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer described this change as overly expansive and exceeds international practice, such as those adopted by the United Kingdom. When a government starts changing definitions to hide the scale of its recklessness, it erodes the trust that underpins every dollar of public spending. Canadians deserve honesty and transparency. They deserve a government that manages the nation's finances, not manipulates them. While the Liberals manipulate the way they will present the budget, the deficit is set to balloon to $68.5 billion. This debt will be carried by my generation, by my children's generation. It's generational debt. It's generational betrayal. A mortgage placed on the future of our children is a failure of duty, Mr. Speaker. Let us stop pretending that the numbers don't matter. You cannot spend your way to affordability. You cannot manipulate the books and pretend your performance has improved. And you cannot betray future generations by burying them beneath mountains of debt and call it an investment. For 10 years, the Liberals promised that deficit spending would fuel growth. Well, after a decade of their investment per worker has fallen by 10.8%. Their deficits have fueled inflation, driven up interest rates, and left Canada in the worst economic growth per capita in the G7. Now this Prime Minister is continuing with the same mistakes and producing the same failures. And the Prime Minister likes to talk about the private sector. Well, let's be clear. It is the private sector that is condemning his ideology, not with words but with actions, with 86,000 job losses, with the second highest unemployment rate in the G7, with $54 billion of investment fleeing this country. They are saying no to reckless spending. They are saying no to a lack of transparency. They are saying no to excessive regulation in a government that is obsessed with punishing success. Capital is leaving because confidence in this Prime Minister has left. Businesses will not invest in a government that punishes success and calls it fairness. Businesses will not invest when projects can be held in regulatory purgatory. They will not build under a government that spends without restraint and calls it compassion. The job losses, unemployment, food bank use, and investment withdrawals are not conservative numbers. They're not Liberal numbers. They're not NDP numbers. They're not Bloc numbers. They are reality. And reality, Mr. Speaker, has a way of catching up. They tell us that a young couple in Aurora, Ontario, working 5 jobs between them, still cannot afford to start a family. They tell us that the small business owners, once the backbone of our economy, are shutting their doors because they simply cannot keep up. They tell us that a generation is losing faith, not in their abilities, in their government and in their future. I would like to share a special message that I received last night from a young woman, and I quote, "We try to do everything right. Get married, have a family, go to school, get careers. My husband makes 6 figures, and once upon a time, that was a dream. But now we are unable to afford the house we desperately need for our young family. I know that life gives you curveballs, but we did not think our own government would actually be our undoing."
Shameful.
Every dollar that leaves this country means lower wages and fewer jobs for Canadian workers. Every dollar that this government spends comes straight from the pockets of those same workers, families already stretched to the limit. And let's be honest, a government that cannot live within its means will never make life affordable for those who must live within theirs. Canadians this week watched as the Prime Minister visited President Trump and promised $1 trillion of investment flowing from Canada to the U.S. We in Canada need a counterweight to bring investment to Canada, and the Prime Minister's lack of action has failed to deliver. Canada needs decisive leadership now. We need our natural resource sector open, our housing sector unleashed from taxes, excessive development charges, and permit delays. Our domestic capital reinvested here at home, not in the U.S. A Canada where investors see stability, opportunity, and transparency. Mr. Speaker, Canada can be strong. We can restore discipline. We can restore trust. We can restore the promise of this beautiful country, but only if we have the courage to face the truth. Instead, we have a Prime Minister focused on manipulating the budget to hide the extent of his reckless spending from Canadians. It's time to stop the illusion that Ottawa can spend its way to prosperity. And it's time, past time, to bring truth, discipline, and integrity back to our public finances. It is what our children and their children deserve from us. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question called the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her remarks here today. I'd like to remind the Canadian public at home that Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. We have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. But the government also recognizes that there's really important work to do around making tough choices, and that's why our budget is going to be coming on November 4th. She mentioned somehow the idea that the government's not trying to be transparent. Actually, it's trying to be more transparent by showing Canadians where operational spending and where long-term investments are happening around capital that will grow our economy. But I do find it a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, and I'm wondering if the honourable member can explain, well, the Conservatives come in and talk about balancing budgets and deficits, why they promised to spend $106 billion in their platform just a few months ago, how that was fiscally responsible. $106 billion, how does she stand in this House and suggest that they are the moral authority on budgeting?
The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the member that the Parliamentary Budget Officer is nonpartisan, it's independent, and he himself has said that the government's finances are very alarming, that they are unsustainable, stupefying, shocking. Mr. Speaker, in the financial sector, the integrity of financial statements is crucial. If you start to change the definitions of what expenses are, an expense is an expense. An expense does not become an asset. Okay? That is a problem. That is a problem. And when you start to change, Mr. Speaker, the timing of financial statements, there's no transparency because you cannot compare to prior years. You cannot compare it to benchmarks in the past. That's the problem.
Exactly. Comments, questions et commentaires. Honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. Since the beginning of this debate, we've heard a back and forth between the various parties, but there's something that's not being said, and it's the fact that this government is a minority government, and the fact that this government got from the population a minority mandate, which normally means, in a context like this, that this government has to work with the opposition parties to get their budget passed. I haven't heard anything, from the government or in the back halls, anything about the government looking to see if the opposition parties would be ready to work with them on the budget. So is this government acting like a majority government or a minority government? Thank you.
Member for Newmarket Aurora.
I appreciate the member's comments, and that is one of my main concerns here. I truthfully just wish that this government would be honest and would focus on balancing the budget, on reining in spending, so that we can actually have a future for our children. You cannot spend your way to affordability. You cannot continue to spend and pretend there's no consequences, Mr. Speaker. There are consequences. It's generational debt. It's generational betrayal, like I said, Mr. Speaker. That is mortgaging our children's future. And this government does not seem to be concerned about this at all. That is irresponsible.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague, a new colleague from Newmarket Aurora. They voted her here today to represent her community. My question to her is this: 76% of seniors are having to support their families today because of this Liberal government's affordability crisis. They don't understand budgets. My colleague does. She comes from the banking sector. So I'd like to ask my colleague how she might be able to teach the Liberals how to balance a budget.
Honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, all I hear from across the aisle is arrogance.
Yep.
No desire to actually work together for a better future for Canadians. Fiscal responsibility is important. It has long-term consequences, but they seem to be laughing and think that it is a joke. And on the topic of seniors, Mr. Speaker, there's a senior in my riding that shared the story with me. He said, Sandra, my father taught me to work hard and give it my all to achieve what I want in life. I gave it my all, and I am still struggling. And those are the consequences of failed policies of this Liberal government.
Way to go, Sandra.